She walked into the bank like any other customer, quiet, unassuming, carrying only a small purse and a gentle smile. Her outfit was simple, her soft shoes well worn by many years. No one gave her a second glance. To the tellers behind the counter, this middle-aged black woman looked like someone who'd come in to ask for directions or to withdraw just enough cash to last a week. So when she quietly requested $500, the staff barely registered it until the whispering began. She sensed the furtive glances and the mocking smiles. One young teller even snickered and nudged her colleague, as if the request were the height of comedy. To them, this wasn't a transaction worth noting, just a poor black woman probably trying to overdraft her account. But instead of anger or shame, she stood calmly, taking it all in with sharp eyes hidden beneath her gentle demeanor. Then, without raising her voice, she leaned forward and said something that instantly silenced the room. She asked to withdraw $2 billion, right then and there. At first, the staff thought they'd misheard. Was she joking, confused, or simply unaware of what she was saying? But what happened next turned that ordinary bank visit into an unforgettable spectacle. Who was this unassuming woman? Why would a powerful CEO choose to appear so humble? And what secret was she about to unveil at the bank today? Stay tuned, because what she revealed next would change everything. That morning at First National Bank began like any other. A quiet atmosphere filled with the familiar sounds of paper rustling, keyboards clicking, and hushed conversations. Then the glass doors slid open, and a middle-aged woman stepped in, so unremarkable she barely drew notice. Alicia Bennett, a black woman in her early 40s, wore a crisp white shirt, faded jeans, and canvas shoes scuffed at the heels. Her eyes were calm, her expression serene, as if she had no interest in attracting attention. She walked slowly toward the teller counter, her gaze slightly lowered, and stood politely to wait her turn. Behind the counter, the young teller, Emily, and her colleague Sarah glanced over at Alicia. They appraised her with skeptical looks, as if wondering what this woman was up to. Emily discreetly elbowed Sarah, her lips curving into a mocking smile. "What do you think she's here for? Probably just asking how to get to the bus stop," she hissed. Sarah stifled a giggle behind her hand. They were accustomed to wealthy clients striding in with confidence and flair. Folks dressed like Alicia usually came for small, routine transactions, not worth a second glance. Finally, Emily reluctantly looked up, her eyes bored, and addressed Alicia in a tone that dripped impatience. "How may I help you today, ma'am?" Alicia slowly raised her head, her dark, clear eyes meeting Emily's. She spoke softly but enunciated every word. "I'd like to withdraw $500. Emily froze, her mocking smile widening. She glanced at Sarah as if to confirm what she'd heard. Sarah raised an eyebrow, struggling to suppress a laugh as she whispered, $500? Does she even have that much in her account? Nearby staff turned to watch, smiling and chuckling, clearly convinced this was one more trivial moment. Alicia maintained her composure, though a flicker of steel flashed in her eyes at the disrespect on display. She said nothing more, standing patiently in silence, as though bracing for what was to come. No one in that room realized that this diminutive, humble woman held a secret powerful enough to upend the entire bank in just a few short minutes. The teasing atmosphere and mocking whispers still lingered around the teller counter, but Alicia remained unfazed. Her gaze drifted from Emily's face to Sarah's, and her lips curved into a thin, knowing smile. After a brief pause, she inhaled softly, as if weighing her words, then spoke clearly and calmly. "I've changed my mind. I'd like to withdraw $2 billion. The entire bank went silent in an instant. The giggles that had fluttered through the room seconds before froze in every staff member's throat. Emily stared, her arrogant smirk dissolving into a look of stunned disbelief as she blinked at Alicia, hardly daring to believe what she'd just heard. Sarah, who only moments ago had egged Emily on, turned pale. Her hand hovered uncertainly over the keyboard, unsure what to do next. Nearby, Richard Thompson, the head of the operations department, a stern-faced, middle-aged man with sharp eyes, strode toward them. He usually prided himself on his composure, but now his face betrayed clear confusion and disquiet. "What's going on here?" Richard asked Emily, his voice firm, but his eyes locked on the woman standing before him. Emily fumbled for words, her voice trembling. She said she wants to withdraw $2 billion. Richard's eyes narrowed as he studied Alicia intently, scrutinizing every detail, from her scuffed shoes and faded sweater to the worn purse in her hand. Nothing about her appearance matched the enormity of her request. A hint of sarcastic disbelief flickered in his gaze. Was this woman playing a prank? Or worse, demanding attention? He forced a polite, dry chuckle, trying to mask his irritation. "Ma'am, you must be mistaken. You just asked to withdraw $2 billion, correct?" "That's right," Alicia replied softly, without hesitation. Her eyes were steady and resolute, carrying a quiet intensity Richard had never seen before. Richard's expression hardened, his voice dropping to a near whisper, edged with incredulity. "Ma'am, this is not a joke. We cannot process requests that aren't grounded in reality." Alicia said nothing further. Instead, she reached into her small purse and slowly withdrew a weathered envelope, its creases worn from repeated opening. Her movements were deliberate, careful to the point of solemnity. She laid the envelope on the counter in front of Richard and met his eyes directly. "I thought you might want to see this before making any judgments." Richard hesitated for a moment, then, driven by professional duty and pride, he opened the envelope. His eyes flicked across its contents, and within seconds his face drained of color. His lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. His hands trembled ever so slightly, betraying the deep panic welling up inside him. Beside him, Emily and Sarah stood in absolute silence, their eyes wide with fear, as they watched their manager. All the tellers and customers in the bank turned toward Alicia and Richard, breath caught, not daring to make a sound. Alicia remained motionless, her gaze having already pierced through every mocking, dismissive thought the staff had harbored since she stepped inside the bank. Behind her unassuming exterior lay a secret, powerful enough to upend the entire world of those who had underestimated her. And this was only the first shock in the chain of events about to unfold at First National Bank. Richard Thompson tried to stifle the rising panic, but the slight tremor in his hands and the beads of sweat forming on his brow gave him away. After standing frozen for several seconds, he hastily refolded the envelope, his gaze restless as he looked at Alicia, seeing her, it seemed, for the first time. "Miss Bennet," Richard said, his tone much softer now, attempting to regain control with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes, "I think we need to discuss this further in my office. If you'll kindly follow me." Alicia said nothing, merely nodded once, her expression composed as if this had all been anticipated. As she rose, Richard steadied his breathing and stole glances at the bank staff. Those who moments ago had mocked Alicia now stood rooted to the spot, eyes full of equal parts curiosity and fear. Richard prided himself on his ability to read clients. In over 15 years as a senior banking executive, he dealt with the rich and powerful, always knowing how to manage any situation. But this was beyond his control. The brief letter in that worn envelope contained names and figures known only to the bank's highest insiders. He opened his office door and motioned for Alicia to enter. The space felt suddenly oppressive once the door clicked shut behind them. Alicia sat lightly in the chair opposite Richard's desk, her calm demeanor almost chilling. Richard felt his throat go dry. He paced slowly around the desk, then settled into his own chair, placing the old envelope before him, his eyes betraying his tension. "Miss Bennet," Richard began hesitantly, choosing his words with care. "To be honest, I'm very surprised. Could you explain the origin of this document?" Alicia met his gaze steadily. Her voice was soft, but each word cut sharply. "I believe you know better than anyone what this letter means. My husband, James Bennet, prepared it long ago. He used to say that if the day ever came when I was slighted, all I'd have to do was present this, and those who thought they controlled everything would think again." The name James Bennet rang like a thunderclap in Richard's mind. James Bennet was a shadowy figure in American finance, notorious for orchestrating massive deals before vanishing years ago. Rumors about him were secrets closely guarded within the bank. Richard sat stunned, realizing he faced the woman he had gravely underestimated. She wielded a secret powerful enough to destroy his reputation and career in an instant. Richard tugged at his collar, trying to dispel the suffocating feeling tightening his chest. His mind raced. Was Alicia here for revenge, or was this a terrible misunderstanding? "Miss Bennet," Richard said, his voice now trembling, "we value all our clients. If you felt disrespected in any way, I would be honored to offer the bank's sincerest apology." Alicia remained silent, regarding him with an understanding look, as if reading each of his thoughts. After several long seconds, she finally spoke. "I didn't come here just for an apology, Mr. Thompson. I came to reclaim what is rightfully mine, what your bank has kept hidden for far too long." Richard swallowed hard, his hands growing cold as fear surged within him. A silent battle of wits and power had begun, and he knew this time his opponent was no unassuming woman to be underestimated. She was Alicia Bennet, and she held the greatest secret of his career, and perhaps of First National Bank itself. Richard Thompson fought to steady his breathing, but his hands still shook in waves as his eyes darted across every line of the document. The brilliant red stamps, the crisp signatures, and the tangled succession of account numbers tied to offshore entities made his heart constrict with fear. This wasn't just routine transaction data. It was the highest-level secrecy, details accessible only to a handful of top executives at First National Bank. He looked up at Alicia Bennet, who sat before him, perfectly composed. Her eyes were calm and clear. Her face showed not the slightest hint of tension. It was that unnerving serenity that sent Richard's mind into a frenzied spiral. He remembered each fragment he'd heard about James Bennet, the mysterious financier who'd sent shockwaves through the markets years ago before vanishing without a trace. Whispers circulated internally at the bank that Bennet had built a covert financial network spanning multiple countries, hidden behind layers of shell companies. Until today, it had all been nothing more than vague rumor. Slowly, Richard set the document down on the desk and met Alicia's gaze. His voice was hoarse with tension. "Miss Bennet, I think you owe us a clearer explanation. These details are extremely sensitive. How did you obtain this document?" Alicia lifted one corner of her mouth in a faint, enigmatic smile. Tilting her head, she kept her eyes locked on Richard's sweat-damped face. "I imagine you know the answer better than I do, Mr. Thompson. My husband, James Bennet, was always one to plan ahead. Before he disappeared, he carefully left me all of this information, along with explicit instructions. If I ever felt disrespected or doubted, This would be the key to reclaim everything that's mine. Richard felt as if a jolt of electricity had raced down his spine. She knew too much, details even he wouldn't dare speak aloud in this closed office. He wondered if the entire scene had been a meticulously staged play, waiting for the perfect moment to ensnare him and his bank in a deadly trap. His voice trembled with caution. "Miss Bennet, I'm honestly not sure what your true intentions are in coming here, but I assure you, our bank prides itself on transparency. If you need any clarifications, we're prepared to provide all the information you require." "Transparency?" Alicia raised an eyebrow, her tone soft but laden with deep irony. "If your bank were truly transparent, I wouldn't have needed to come here today, Mr. Thompson." Richard felt the chill in her words. Everything he'd built, his career, his reputation, could collapse instantly if these secrets went public. One phone call or a single email, and his world would be irrevocably upended. "So, what is it you really want?" Richard asked, clinging to the last shreds of composure. Alicia's eyes shone with resolute clarity as she fixed him with her gaze. "I want you to fulfill my original request. Grant me full access to the funds that belong to me. And most importantly, I want every one of those who once dismissed me, those who thought they could hide their dirty secrets behind a glossy facade, to face the consequences of their own actions." Richard was speechless. For the first time in his life, he had utterly lost control of the situation. This was no longer a meek, overlooked woman. Alicia Bennet was a formidable power broker, and she held not only his fate, but the fate of First National Bank in her hands. He swallowed hard, his heart pounding, and finally managed to ask, his voice laced with fear and desperation, "At the end of it all, who exactly are you, Alicia Bennet?" Alicia gave him a faint, confident smile. Each word she spoke rang with unyielding resolve. "I am the one who's going to bring the truth to light, Mr. Thompson. And you'd better be prepared. This is only the beginning." While Richard Thompson's office remained thick with tense silence, outside it, bank employee Sarah Mitchell could no longer curb her mounting curiosity. She glanced toward the closed office door, noting Richard's unprecedented panic. Driven by intrigue, she decided to dig deeper into the mysterious woman who'd left everyone at the bank stunned. Sarah quickly sat at her desk, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she logged into the bank's internal system. Within moments, she was staring at files reserved for senior management. One name flashed on the screen and she froze in astonishment. Project Gemini. Top secret. Executive access only. Her heart pounded, equal parts fear and excitement causing her hand to tremble as she clicked open the folder. Instantly, streams of classified data appeared. Hundreds of covert international transactions, encrypted foreign accounts, and a long roster of shell companies scattered across the globe. More chilling still, buried among the entries was a name that sent shivers down her spine. Alicia Bennet. Sarah leaned back in her chair, eyes wide, unable to believe what she saw. The unassuming woman who'd walked in earlier was directly linked to this top-secret project. A thought struck Sarah. Could Alicia be the key figure the bank has been hiding all along? She suddenly recalled her own dismissive attitude toward Alicia when she first arrived. Sarah's face paled, filled with dread at how quickly she'd misjudged someone. She realized she'd made a grave mistake. Wasting no time, Sarah expanded the subfolders of Project Gemini, and what she found next nearly floored her. One document stated, James Bennet, missing since August 2018. His accounts have been frozen and secretly transferred under bank control. It all clicked. The bank had concealed James Bennett's massive fortune for years, and now Alicia Bennett, the seemingly powerless wife, had arrived to reclaim it all. Panicked, Sarah bolted upright, her eyes scanning the trading floor. Every colleague stood motionless, all eyes fixed on the manager's office. The tension was palpable. She knew that leaking this revelation could bring the bank crashing down in seconds. Suddenly, the manager's office door swung open. Richard emerged, ashen-faced and sweating. His gaze swept the room until it landed on Sarah, whose panic was obvious. In that moment, Sarah realized he must have discovered her breach. Richard strode toward her, his voice low and warning. "Sarah, you accessed a document you weren't authorized to see, didn't you?" Sarah stared into his steely eyes, her throat tightening. His expression, a mix of anger and fear, conveyed the gravity of the situation. I wanted to know who that woman was," Sarah stammered, desperate to explain. Richard gripped her wrist, his voice hoarse with tension. "You have no idea what you've done, Sarah. This isn't just an internal banking matter. It could affect every single one of us. Project Gemini isn't merely a financial program. It's a ticking time bomb." His words echoed in Sarah's mind like a haunting alarm. She realized the file she'd unwittingly opened could destroy everyone's career at the bank, hers included. Meanwhile, inside his office, Alicia Bennett sat quietly, her eyes confidently fixed on the now shut door. She knew that every piece on the board had been revealed, and the real battle was only just beginning. As Richard Thompson's grip tightened on Sarah Mitchell's wrist, his chilling warning drew every bank employee's eyes to them. But at that very moment, the glass doors at the front of the bank slowly swung open, capturing everyone's attention. Two unfamiliar men entered, tall and broad-shouldered, clad in impeccably tailored black suits, as if they'd stepped out of a secret briefing. They moved with deliberate slowness yet absolute purpose, coming to a halt just inside the entrance. Their cold gazes swept the entire banking hall, sharp as twin blades of steel. Instantly, every sound in the bank fell silent. The nearby tellers instinctively backed away a few steps, desperate to avoid the intimidating stares of these strange visitors. None of the staff had ever seen them before, but from their imposing presence and the rigid alertness of their stance, it was clear they were no ordinary customers. Bank Security Officer Tom Harris felt a surge of alarm. With over 20 years in security, he recognized danger in an instant from their posture and bearing. He glanced at the radio clipped to his belt, finger poised over the call button, but something held him back. His instincts screamed these were not common robbers. They'd come with a far more ominous purpose. Meanwhile, Richard Thompson finally registered the arrival of the two men. He released Sarah's wrist and shot a worried look toward his office, where Alicia Bennett still sat calmly waiting. He sensed immediately that their appearance was no coincidence. They were tied directly to Alicia and the earth-shattering secret he'd just uncovered. Silently, Richard hurried toward his office, heart pounding, palms growing icy with fear. In his mind raced the terrifying question: had she anticipated every move? Had she come not just to withdraw money or demand justice, but to exact vengeance and expose every hidden truth? Sarah Mitchell stood frozen in place, her legs threatening to buckle. She glanced once more at the two men, their expressions still unmoving and ruthless. Her eyes met those of the taller man with steely gray eyes, and for an instant she felt as if her very thoughts and actions were being laid bare, sending a tremor of terror through her. The two strangers remained motionless at the entrance, their cold eyes tracking every small movement of the bank staff. No one dared speak or even shift. The tension was so thick it felt as though the slightest sound might release something terrifying. Richard burst into his office, ducked inside, and shut the door behind him so quickly he barely looked back. Once the door clicked shut, he leaned against it, gasping for breath as though he'd escaped some unspeakable threat. Alicia sat unmoved, hands folded neatly in her lap, her sharp gaze fixed on the closed door. She offered him a slight, knowing smile and spoke, each word laced with icy resolve. "The two men out there, Mr. Thompson, are my reminder to everyone who once thought they could underestimate me and my family. Do you now grasp the gravity of this situation?" Richard found himself speechless. In that moment, he realized the power play unfolding in his bank had run far deeper than he'd ever imagined. And, most terrifying of all, Alicia Bennett was not acting alone. She had dangerous allies behind her, ready to unearth the darkest secrets buried within First National Bank. Outside the office, the two mysterious men still stood like statues, their cold eyes trained unwaveringly on Richard's door. An invisible war for control had truly begun, and everyone in the bank was now caught in its crossfire, willing or not. The office felt increasingly suffocating, as if Richard Thompson were trapped in a maze with no escape. His gaze locked once more on Alicia Bennett. She sat calmly before him, as though she had anticipated every move in this deadly power game. Just as Richard opened his mouth to speak, Alicia reached into her small, worn purse and carefully withdrew a second envelope. This one, pristine, and entirely unlike the aged one she'd handed him before. She placed it gently on the desk and slid it toward Richard, her voice soft but commanding. "This letter was prepared by my husband, James Bennett, before he disappeared. He instructed that it be opened only in the most urgent circumstances, and I believe that time has come, Mr. Thompson." Richard stared at the immaculate envelope, his hands trembling involuntarily as a growing unease crept over him. His heart pounded, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He knew this envelope was the key to a truth far more terrifying than anything he'd faced so far. At last, unable to resist his curiosity and mounting tension, Richard's hand shook as he took the envelope, awkwardly peeled back the seal, and unfolded the paper inside. As his eyes raced over the first lines, his face drained of color and sweat beaded on his temples. This was no ordinary letter. It was a direct message from James Bennett himself, the powerful billionaire who'd rocked global markets before vanishing mysteriously years ago. The letter wasn't addressed to Richard, but to the chairman of the board of First National Bank, Sir Alexander Kingsley, the man who held ultimate authority over the institution. Richard fought to steady his trembling hands, but each sentence in the letter felt like a knife twisting in his gut. It warned that James Bennett was fully aware of every secret the bank had concealed over the years: illegal transactions, hidden offshore accounts, front companies, all under his control before he disappeared. At the end was a stark declaration: should I vanish under suspicious circumstances, my wife, Alicia Bennett, is to inherit all power and truth. Richard looked up at Alicia, horror etched on his features. This woman was no helpless victim. She was the chosen heir to a staggering power, capable of destroying anyone who'd crossed her, including Richard Thompson and the entire First National Bank. His throat went dry. His voice was barely a whisper. "Miss Bennett, you already knew what was in this letter, didn't you?" Alicia offered a slight confident smile, her icy gaze never wavering. "My husband always has a reason for everything he does, Mr. Thompson. I'm simply following his instructions. You know exactly what you must do now." Richard understood the implication immediately. He snatched up the phone and dialed the bank's highest priority emergency line. The ringing seemed endless, each tone heightening his anxiety. Finally, a voice answered. Deep, authoritative, but edged with irritation. "Thompson here. Why are you using the emergency line?" Richard steadied his voice as best he could, though it still trembled. "Sir Kingsley, we have a serious situation. Alicia Bennett, wife of James Bennett, is in my office. She's just handed me a letter directly from James for you." Silence fell over the line long enough for Richard to sense Kingsley's shock and alarm. Then Kingsley's voice returned, carrying unmistakable concern. "What did you say?" "Do not move. I'm on my way. Under no circumstances let Alicia Bennett leave the bank until I arrive." Richard set the phone down slowly and looked at Alicia Bennett. She remained motionless, her expression composed as if nothing could surprise her. He knew in that moment that the real power struggle had only just begun, and its fallout could cost him everything he held dear. Outside the office, the two mysterious men still stood silently at the entrance, their cold eyes never leaving the door. Loyal bodyguards prepared to protect Alicia, the woman holding the bank's greatest secret. The moment Richard Thompson set the phone down, just as he was trying to steady himself after calling Chairman Alexander Kingsley, an abrupt blackout plunged the entire First National Bank into darkness. Fluorescent lights snapped off. Computer screens went black, and the steady hum of the air conditioning cut out, turning the already tense atmosphere into something suffocating. A few seconds later, when the power returned, all the computer monitors flickered back on. Only now they were bathed in ominous red warning alerts. Richard leapt to his feet, eyes darting to the screen on his desk. His heart nearly stopped when he saw what appeared there. Alicia Bennett's secret account, the one that had been frozen and hidden for years, had suddenly reactivated itself. Numbers were scrolling upward at a dizzying pace, and Richard felt lightheaded, bracing himself against the desk as his body trembled. The balance wasn't merely the $2 billion Alicia had requested. It was an astronomical sum many times greater, enough to upend the very power structure of the bank. Outside his office, the alarm tones from other terminals erupted in unison, spreading panic across the trading floor. Bank staff rushed to check their systems, faces draining of color as they realized this mysterious account was displaying financial figures that had never been recorded before. Sarah Mitchell stood frozen in front of her screen, pale and wide-eyed with shock and fear. She whispered, "No way. How is this even possible?" At the entrance, the two mysterious men remained motionless, but now their gazes were even sharper, as though they'd predicted this turn of events. Their silent, icy composure only deepened the employee's dread. Inside the office, Richard slowly turned to look at Alicia, his face a mask of desperation and confusion. Alicia's eyes remained calm, as if she'd foreseen every twist, and a faint knowing smile played at her lips. "You! What have you done?" Richard croaked, his voice hoarse with fear. Alicia tilted her head slightly, her sharp gaze locked on him. She spoke quietly but with undeniable authority. "I did nothing, Mr. Thompson. The bank's system simply restored what belongs to my husband and me." Richard's throat felt parched as he raced through his knowledge of the bank's highest security protocols. An account that had been frozen shouldn't reactivate itself after a power outage, unless it had been programmed with a secret mechanism he never knew existed. And now he realized the horrifying truth. James Bennett hadn't just left behind financial secrets. He'd engineered an automatic trigger powerful enough to collapse the bank's defenses the moment outside intervention occurred. He recalled the final words of Bennett's letter to Chairman Kingsley, that Alicia was to inherit everything. Now he understood that Bennett hadn't merely sent a letter. He'd crafted a perfect plan, waiting for the precise moment to reclaim the power he'd lost. Richard's hands shook as he glanced at the screen again, recognizing that the colossal balance wasn't just wealth. It represented control over countless companies, international deals, even the invisible levers of power within the bank itself. In an instant, Alicia Bennett had transformed from a woman dismissed by her peers into the institution's most powerful figure. He inhaled deeply, struggling to hold on to the last shred of composure. This was no longer just his crisis. It was a life-or-death struggle between Alicia Bennett and the hidden forces First National Bank had protected for years. Richard hurried back to the phone, his hand trembling as he lifted the receiver and dialed the emergency line for Chairman Kingsley, the only person who might salvage this disaster. "Sir Kingsley, the situation is out of control," Richard stammered. "Alicia Bennett's account has reactivated itself with an unprecedented balance. We're on the brink of losing everything." Silence crackled over the line before Kingsley's cold voice cut through. "Do not let her leave the bank until I arrive. This time, we face Alicia Bennett head-on." Richard hung up, feeling as though he'd plunged into an unending abyss. Before him, Alicia Bennett sat like a queen, poised to reclaim her throne. A power struggle of unprecedented scale had begun, and First National Bank was the battlefield. The moment Richard Thompson set the phone down with trembling hands, the office door slowly swung open, shattering the deathly silence that had suffocated the room. The two mysterious men who'd stood guard outside stepped in with their usual cold precision, their eyes as sharp and menacing as ever. But they no longer entered alone. Between them strode a tall, elder figure with shock-white hair and the commanding presence of the bank's chairman, William Harrington. William advanced into the office with deliberate, measured steps, each one radiating the authority of a man used to controlling everything at his fingertips. His gaze swept the room until it came to rest on Alicia Bennett's face. Their eyes met, his exuded icy command, hers a composed yet razor-sharp resolve, utterly unshaken. Richard Thompson sprang to his feet and bowed respectfully, but William barely acknowledged him. His full attention was fixed on the small yet undeniably dangerous woman seated across the desk. William spoke at last, his voice low and guarded. "Alicia Bennett, I never expected our paths to cross again under circumstances like these." Alicia lifted her chin and met his gaze evenly, her voice cold but every word precise and cutting. "You're the one who created these circumstances, William. You took everything from my husband. Today, I've come to take it back." Her words struck William like a blade, draining the color from his face. The lines on his forehead deepened, and for the first time, tension flickered in his eyes. William drew a slow, steadying breath, attempting to mask his unease, but his two silent companions were quick to notice the tremor in their leader. No one knew better than William that Alicia's accusation was far from baseless. For years he had deftly manipulated James Bennett's hidden finances, using that immense fortune to cement his own absolute power within the bank. He had assumed that Bennett's disappearance would bury those secrets forever. But now the woman he'd so severely underestimated sat before him, wielding the truth he'd hoped would remain buried. A chilling silence fell over the office. Richard stood frozen near the desk, unwilling to intervene in the high-stakes confrontation between these two titans. His heart pounded so fiercely he feared it might burst his chest, and his hand still shook at the sight of what he'd just witnessed. William fixed Alicia with a hard stare, his voice dropping to an almost conspiratorial whisper of arrogance. "You understand what you're threatening, Alicia. The information you possess could bring down everyone in this room, including you. Are you truly prepared to face those consequences?" Alicia's gaze never wavered, her expression unflinching, and yet her eyes grew colder than ever before. I have already lost my husband, my family, the life I once knew. What consequence could be worse than that, William? I have nothing left to lose, whereas you still have everything to protect: your power, your money, your reputation. I didn't come here to negotiate. I came to reclaim what is mine and to make you pay for what you took." William Harrington sucked in a deep breath, and for the first time, the frail lines of desperation and defeat showed in his aged features. He nodded slowly, eyes cast to the floor as he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "You're right, Alicia. I took everything from James, and now you're here to demand justice. But remember this: people like me never relinquish power so easily." Alicia rose to her feet, her demeanor still calm but radiating an overwhelming authority few had ever felt. "This isn't about negotiation, William. Power is no longer in your hands. That account has reactivated, and now I hold complete control." William Harrington remained motionless, keenly aware that the balance had irrevocably shifted. The dark secrets he'd guarded for years had become the sharpest weapon in Alicia Bennett's arsenal. The very woman he'd once dismissed now reduced him to trembling uncertainty. In that small office, everyone present witnessed a painful truth. William Harrington's era was ending, and a new reign, with Alicia Bennett at its center, was just beginning. The office fell into an oppressive silence as William Harrington finally faced his first defeat. Alicia Bennett remained standing, her gaze steady, watching the once all-powerful man struggle to cling to the last shreds of his pride. Slowly, she reached into her worn purse again and withdrew a third envelope, the final one she'd guarded so carefully, waiting for this decisive moment. She placed the envelope on the desk and slid it toward William with calm certainty. "Mr. Harrington, you should read this carefully. I believe it will settle every dispute." William took the envelope with slow, deliberate hands, acutely aware of the power slipping from his grasp. He opened it and withdrew the documents within. Within seconds, his face drained of color, his eyes widened in shock and fear. These were official legal papers, certified by leading attorneys and sealed by a court. They stated in clear detail: in the event that Mr. James Bennett disappears or dies under mysterious circumstances, full legal control of his assets, shares, foreign corporations, and financial power shall be transferred to his wife, Mrs. Alicia Bennett. William trembled, struck mute. Those words amounted to a death sentence for the empire he'd built over decades. His eyes raced through the supplemental clauses, each line plunging him deeper into a bottomless abyss. Beside him, Richard Thompson saw the alarm on William's face and stepped closer, peering at the documents. When he grasped their meaning, his legs nearly gave way. He gripped the desk edge to steady himself. Outside the office, news spread like a tsunami, sweeping away every last bit of calm in the bank. Sarah Mitchell stood frozen as a colleague summarized the documents. Those who had mocked Alicia's arrival now felt the scorching burn of shame, realizing how gravely they'd erred. Alicia remained standing, her voice steady as she addressed William. "These papers were prepared long before James disappeared. He knew you would stop at nothing to seize our assets. He planned for the worst. And now, Mr. Harrington, the worst has come to pass." William gripped the stack of papers, fury and helplessness flickering in his eyes. "You've been preparing all of this in secret for years, Alicia." Alicia shook her head, her eyes cold yet tinged with sorrow. "I prepared nothing, William. I merely followed my husband's instructions. James understood you better than you understand yourself, Mr. Harrington. And now, everything he foresaw has come true. William exhaled sharply, feeling the world spin around him. He realized that Alicia not only held James Bennett's wealth, she now commanded absolute power over the bank, its foreign subsidiaries, its hidden accounts, and every secret deal he'd concealed. With these documents, Alicia could not only destroy his position but also expose him to legal repercussions. "What will you do next, Alicia?" William asked, his voice stripped of its former authority, replaced by desperation. Alicia met his gaze, her eyes sharper and more resolute than ever. "I will do what should have been done long ago, William. I will expose every secret within this bank, restore justice for my husband, and hold everyone who aided you accountable. Power and wealth are not yours to manipulate forever." William fell silent, bowing his head as he tasted utter defeat for the first time in his life. Decades of power, illicit transactions, and carefully concealed schemes, everything vanished because of the very woman he'd once dismissed. When Alicia strode from the office, the bank's employees no longer looked at her with scorn or mockery. They watched her with a mixture of awe and apprehension, fully aware of one thing. Alicia Bennett had overturned the entire balance of power, and she now held the future of everyone at First National Bank in her hands. The instant Richard Thompson set the phone down with trembling hands, the office door creaked open, shattering the heavy silence. The two mysterious men who had stood guard at the entrance stepped in, their expressions as cold and unyielding as ever. But they no longer came alone. Between them walked a tall, silver-haired figure whose formidable presence filled the room. William Harrington. William advanced slowly, each measured step echoing his accustomed authority. His eyes swept the office until they landed on Alicia Bennett. Their gazes locked, his, the steely command of a once untouchable chairman. Hers, a composed yet razor-sharp resolve. Outside the office, a sudden alarm blared from the central terminal, jolting everyone on the trading floor. A few frantic employees rushed to the main screen, their faces morphing from bewilderment into astonishment. Richard turned sharply to look, his heart pounding. A second secret account had just reactivated, and this one didn't belong to Alicia. It bore the name of someone long thought gone forever, James Bennett. The entire bank fell into a deathly hush as the notification appeared on the large monitor. A small, almost imperceptible transaction had been executed from James Bennett's account, but it was precisely that quiet precision that sent chills through every onlooker. Clearly, this had been arranged in advance, a cryptic message from a man the world believed dead. Sarah Mitchell brought her hand to her mouth, eyes wide with panic. How? How is this possible? James Bennett is still alive? Richard stood motionless, struggling to believe what he saw. He glanced toward William's office, where the chairman remained frozen like a statue, his eyes vacant with shock. Richard knew immediately this development dwarfed everything that had come before. If James Bennett truly lived, the upheaval Alicia had engineered was only the beginning. Down the hallway, Alicia paused as she heard the commotion, sensing the abrupt spike in tension. She turned and stared at the main screen, her heart catching in her throat when she saw her husband's name appear. Confidence drained from her face, replaced by a complex mix of joy, terror, and disbelief. William Harrington emerged from the office, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Alicia, you knew about this?" Alicia shook her head slowly, confusion flickering across her features for the first time that day. "I knew nothing, William. Like you, I believed James was gone. But this transaction, only he could have set it up." William drew a ragged breath, his eyes fixed on the flickering line of text. A cold dread washed over him. This was no accident. This was an intentional signal. A chilling announcement that James Bennet was alive somewhere, silently observing, and now speaking through the only means he'd left. Richard's voice quavered as he stepped toward Alicia, fear plain in his tone. "Miss Bennet, if James really is alive, then everything we've been through so far may just be the prelude to something infinitely larger." Alicia didn't answer immediately. She continued to stare at the screen, parsing the true meaning of that clandestine transaction. She recalled her husband's final words before he vanished. "No matter what happens, remember, I always have one last move." His warning echoed in her mind like a cold, haunted whisper. Turning back to William, her voice firm and unwavering, she declared, "If James is alive, then every secret you've hidden and every betrayal you've committed will be exposed. And this time, William, you'll have to answer not to me, but to him, the man you betrayed and destroyed all those years ago." William fell silent, the full weight of his failure crashing upon him. He realized he had made his greatest mistake believing he could manipulate and bury every dark deed. Now, the truth stood not only in Alicia's hands, but could resurface in the person he thought he'd eliminated forever. Across the bank, whispers and anxious glances spread like wildfire. Everyone understood that the mysterious trigger from James Bennet's account signaled the start of an even more brutal power struggle. And this time, no one could remain on the sidelines. Alicia stood quietly, her emotions roiling beneath the surface. If James truly lived, the joy of reunion would be tempered by unprecedented danger. She knew now that she would face not only William Harrington, but also the man she had long believed lost, someone whose final move was still to come. On the screen, the secret transaction blinked relentlessly, a clear declaration from James Bennet that the power struggle had only just begun, and that he alone would decide its outcome. The tension in the bank was suffocating as everyone's eyes turned to Alicia Bennet, who lifted the phone that had just vibrated in her hand. On the screen, the name she'd thought lost forever now glowed clearly: James Bennet. Alicia felt her hand shaking uncontrollably. She'd always prided herself on staying calm under any circumstances, but the sudden reappearance of James shattered her composure. She whispered, barely daring to believe it, "James, you're really alive?" No one in the bank dared speak. Alicia's soft words echoed in the hush, confirming an inexplicable mystery. Even William Harrington, the man who always controlled every situation, stood frozen, his face ashen, unable to hide his confusion and shock at James's mysterious return. Richard Thompson stepped closer, his eyes wide with astonishment and worry. "Miss Bennet, this could be some kind of glitch. James has been missing so long. How could he still be alive?" Alicia didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the phone screen. The sight of her husband's name burned questions through her mind. Hope and fear clutched at her heart. She knew James better than anyone. He never acted randomly. If he sent this signal, it meant a meticulously planned move lay behind it. She looked up at Richard, her voice serious as never before. "James would never send a signal without a reason, Mr. Thompson. If he's really alive, then what we're facing is far more terrifying." From across the lobby, William Harrington heard Alicia's words, and his tension tightened further. He knew James Bennet was brilliant and cunning. He'd underestimated Alicia and now paid the price. But James was an even more formidable opponent. Someone who knew William's every weakness and every dark secret he'd hidden over his career. William stepped forward, for the first time feeling he needed cooperation instead of confrontation. "Alicia, if James is truly alive, you understand what we're up against. You and I have been on opposite sides, but right now, perhaps we should work together to uncover the full truth." Alicia met William's gaze, cold and unwavering. "You want to cooperate, William?" "I don't trust you. You're the one who made James disappear, and now you're afraid he might come back and expose everything. I think you're seeking protection, not cooperation." William drew a deep breath, striving to keep his voice steady. "You're right, Alicia, I'm terrified. I fear because I know James Bennet has the power to destroy everything I've built over the years. But you should be afraid too, because even you don't know what James wants or why he stayed silent all these years." William's words gave Alicia pause. She knew her husband well, but she also knew how mysterious he could be. His sudden return raised questions she couldn't yet answer. If James was alive, why hadn't he reached out to her? Why wait until now, when everything was already in turmoil, to make himself known? Alicia scanned the bank's interior, sensing the fear and uncertainty spreading through every staff member. Those who had once sneered at her now fell silent, waiting for the final verdict. She gripped the phone tighter, her eyes steely as she spoke with unwavering resolve. "I will find out the truth. Whether James is out there somewhere or truly gone, I need to know what really happened." Richard stood beside her, feeling for the first time that he was just a small pawn in this vast power game. He realized that the mystery of James Bennet's return was more than a simple signal. It was a chilling warning to everyone present. Alicia took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and strode out of the bank, leaving countless stunned and fearful eyes on her back. She knew that from this moment forward, her life would be forever changed. She would no longer face just William Harrington or First National Bank. She would unravel a much deeper mystery, the fate of the man she loved and believed lost forever. Inside, the screen continued to blink with that cryptic transaction. A cold challenge from James Bennet to all who watched, reminding them that this game was far from over, and that the deepest secret still awaited discovery. The moment the bank doors closed behind Alicia, an almost eerie quiet settled over the lobby. Curious, stunned bank employees watched her confident, purposeful strides until she vanished from sight. For the first time, everyone at First National realized that true power doesn't come from outward glamour. It comes from careful preparation, steadfast resolve, and a commitment to justice. Richard Thompson stood frozen where he'd been, staring at the locked doors as if he could will them to reopen and grant him a chance to make things right. Deep regret flooded his thoughts. He'd been wrong to underestimate Alicia because of her humble appearance. Everything he'd built over decades now trembled under the weight of her truth. In a corner, William Harrington, the man once synonymous with absolute authority at the bank, stood motionless, his face pale, eyes clouded with bitter despair. He understood at that moment that his reign of power had ended the instant Alicia walked out of the bank. James Bennet's mysterious return wasn't just a threat. It was a verdict on all the misdeeds he'd committed. In the days that followed, First National Bank descended into unprecedented chaos. Headlines blared the scandal. Investigators swarmed in, and those untouchable executives, William and Richard among them, were forced to resign and face intense scrutiny. Dozens of employees linked to Project Gemini and the illicit transactions were either fired or indicted. Sarah Mitchell, the teller who'd first stumbled onto Alicia's secret, learned a painful lesson. You cannot judge someone by appearances. She quietly packed her things and slipped out of the bank, burdened with shame and a lesson she'd never forget. Meanwhile, Alicia Bennet quietly receded from the public eye. No press conferences, no grand announcements. She knew her work was done. The rest was up to those she'd exposed to grapple with the consequences of her and James's sacrifices. Yet, somewhere in the shadows, Alicia still clutched her phone, hoping for a call or message from the man she loved most. The question of James Bennett's fate haunted her day and night, pointing toward an even deeper mystery. Over the following months, First National underwent a sweeping overhaul. Transparent policies replaced the cover-ups, wrongdoers were publicly named, and the bank's reputation was painstakingly rebuilt on trust and accountability. Values Alicia Bennett had coerced them to embrace. In time, everyone who'd witnessed those events came to appreciate the most valuable lesson from the woman they'd once dismissed as unassuming. Real strength isn't in flashy facades, but in the fierce will, sharp intellect, and unwavering conviction of someone who knows exactly why and for whom they fight. Years later, when people recall that extraordinary day, they'll always remember the sight of Alicia Bennett departing the bank with regal poise, silent, yet more resonant than any speech. She delivered a message not just to First National, but to the world. Never underestimate someone because of their humble appearance. Behind quiet restraint often lies the power to change everything. And in the dark recesses of those still unanswered secrets, Alicia continues to wait, knowing that her greatest mystery, James Bennett himself, remains out there somewhere, biding his time to return and complete his final move. If you've been inspired by Alicia's story, share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping tales. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.